give us the honor of opening up with the Pledge of Allegiance. Where is it? Oh, that's all right. Like that.
I pledge allegiance
To the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Welcome, everybody. All right. So we have scheduled SB 539 FN, and we'll look to the prime sponsor for that bill. Is there a prime sponsor anywhere located in this room for 539?
He's coming. He's.
Where is he? Take the long way home.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman, honorable members of Energy. My name for the record is Mark McConkey. I am the senator from District 3, the proud senator of District 3. A prime sponsor of Senate Bill 539. I was approached by members of the biomass, wood to energy industry, and the timber industry about an effort to align the New Hampshire biomass industry, biomass plants in Class 3 of the Renewable Portfolio Standards Program. I'll get there. The industry has worked for many months in meeting with various stakeholders about the proposal. While discussions have been very constructive, we request the committee send Senate Bill 539 to interim study as there is more work to be done. The markets for renewable energy credits are dynamic, and there are some pieces that still need to study before the change is enacted. The RPS program and the REC markets are critical to the sustainability of the biomass industry, and we cannot take the chance of unintended consequences. The industry will continue to work with stakeholders, Department of Energy, as it moves towards these efforts. Thank you so much for this consideration request interim study. We'll come back in the future.
Thank you, Senator. I assume there's no questions, and we're seeing none. Thank you very much.
Thank you, sir.
Clifton, if we go to interim study, do you still want to speak? Clifton Below? You all set? Says you did. You opposed and you wanted to speak on it. Okay. Anybody else want to speak on this bill? I do. I get the wrong number.
539.
You know, that's my fault. I didn't look at the bill. I apologize. It's my fault. Do you still not want to speak? Jody, do you want to still speak? You want to hit your speaker thing? Who are you?
I am Jody Grimbliss, and I represent Bridgewater Power Company, a biomass plant in Bridgewater, New Hampshire. And I'm here with
Jason Stock, New Hampshire Timberland.
And there's some changes that are coming up the road, which makes this probably not a good idea. To go forward.
we just want to get through some of the more market dynamics details before we make such a change, because that program is so critical to the biomass plants that we don't want to see any unintended consequences. You'll probably see us maybe later on this session. There's a couple of House bills that might do some damage to the RPS program, and you might see us here for those,
Yeah.
but you won't see us here right now.
Okay.
So we appreciate the interim study.
All right. Thank you for stepping up. Matt, Lee's here as well. Anybody else want to speak on this at all, or just seeing how we get direction that we want to go? With that, thank you very much, and we're going to close the hearing. Done. All right. You want to? Yeah. Is there a motion to move into?
Second.
to exec session, seconded by Senator Waters. So is there a motion on SB 539FN? And could you hit your microphone?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Rusty.
Yeah, same here.
I move interim study at the sponsor's request.
And seconded by Senator McConkey. All in favor of interim study? Aye. Any opposed? Seeing none, is there a motion to move out of executive session? Can we do consent with 4?
Yeah.
Yeah. Is there a motion for consent? All in favor of consent?
Aye.
Aye. And any opposed? Seeing none, would you like to take it out?
I'd be,
Senator McConkey would like to take it out. Is there a motion to move out of
So
executive?
moved.
All in favor?
aye.
Any opposed? Seeing none. We're back in session again. And look at that. We got time to sing a song together.
Because
All right.
you got to wait.
We have to wait.
You wait for that.
No, I don't. I think, yeah. Hearing for SB 592 from the prime sponsor. Senator Waters, you have the floor.
Here to introduce Senate Bill 592. This bill enables regional conservation and energy regional and conservation group planning for habitat strongholds and wildlife corridors. You'll see that there's an amendment 0055, which makes just a couple little wording changes and then eliminates one requirement, which I'll discuss when I get to it in the bill. What the bill essentially does is try to continue the efforts that we've done over the last decades to ensure that wildlife corridors and habitat strongholds can support our wildlife population. One might think of bear, moose, bobcat, but also deer and many other species for whom this kind of habitat connectivity makes sure that the health and the population of these species and also supports hunting and fishing activities as well. So we've been on, as I said, about 10 years, we've been under this effort. To start out with a study that Fish and Game conducted to look at wildlife corridors and habitat connectivity, kind of related to the 10-year wildlife action plan, but also related to changing and shifting habitats because of differentiating climate and warming, but also more particularly because of the increasing fragmentation of the New Hampshire landscape, what with development and other factors. And I will say that this kind of culminated first in the bill from 2019, Senate Bill 200, which established the definitions of wildlife corridor and habitat stronghold, which are incorporated or referenced in this bill. And it also directed a number of state agencies such as Transportation, Fish and Game, and so on to include in the 10-year highway plan and other places wildlife corridors and habitat connectivity. And that good work has continued. So this builds on that by saying the conservation commissions and the regional planning groups would now be empowered to consider wildlife corridors and habitat strongholds and connectivity in their planning and conservation activities as well. I will note, aside from the good work by the state, that a number of the land trusts around the state have done extraordinary work on land acquisition for habitat strongholds and for wildlife corridors. I think the Southeast Land Trust has a many year plan to provide connectivity from the Great Bay into towards central New Hampshire. The Forest Society, the New Hampshire, the Nature Conservancy, and land trusts around have looked at how we can preserve our animal species, working with Fish and Game to increase connectivity and habitat strongholds. So simply put, what this does is that in the statute governing conservation commissions, you will see that I'm looking at the amended version here. It now has this phrase, including habitat strongholds as defined in RSA 207:1, 13-A, and wildlife corridors as defined there. That these are parts of under their purview now in the inventory of lands that they keep. You'll see that the amendment also changes that word index to inventory. Index is kind of an outdated term. It's really an inventory is what they do. So there was a request from the conservation commissions to make that change as long as we were doing this as well. So the first part of the bill deals with the conservation commissions, and then the second two parts of the bill deal with regional planning. And you'll see the two places amended for regional planning are in the purposes, that under the purpose statement, all the other things that it does in regional planning, it would include conservation, including habitat strongholds and wildlife corridors. And then if you turn the page to the powers and duties, if it's a purpose, then it needs to be in the powers and duties. And so that's why it is included there. Public reservations and recreation areas, then the bold land conservation areas, including habitat strongholds and wildlife corridors. And the last page of the bill, you'll see that the conservation commissions and the regional planning groups are free to consult with the director of Fish and Game. And I, will note that this is very timely for Fish and Game because our new wildlife action plan is out. And, the goal 3.2 is to maintain and enhance landscape connectivity to support wildlife movement. So this is really in accordance with that new wildlife action plan that's coming out, which will also define areas that, given that, need to have particular attention. You'll notice that the amendment crosses out B that was under 5 in the original bill. It turns out, there's a lot of states that are looking at transmission corridors as possibly as use, double purposing them as wildlife corridors. And talking with Eversource, it turned out that this might raise some issue of property rights and the complications around transmission corridor, who owns what, and so on and so forth. So it's really just easiest to delete that and not really necessary to do at this time and too complicated as well. So that's the bill, that's the amendment, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Questions from the committee? I do have a question with regards to, will this affect any of the forestry industry at all? Wood cutting or anything like that, timber industry at all?
Not that I can determine, no. I mean, it didn't, we had a lot of discussion when we originally did these definitions in the wildlife corridors and habitat and connectivity, and there were any issues that were raised at that time were addressed with the original definitional language.
Senator McCarthy?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thanks for taking my question. I've followed the subject matter on corridor and linking trails from one property to another over the years, so I'm intrigued by what you have here. My question is persons that own large tracts of land that at some point have sat vacant, and now the opportunity now is our need for housing and breaking out some of those properties and maintaining a robust conservation portfolio. Is this, once this is in place, will this negate homeowners from being able to work with their land? By calling out areas that cannot be used?
Not whatsoever. There's no authorization here to change anything about anybody's land ownership in this. This identifies areas that are corridors or habitat strongholds. It may be that CELT or Fish and Game or Nature Conservancy or other land trusts try to work with landowners or try to acquire properties, but this in no way abrogates any private property rights.
Thank you, sir.
Rosenwald?
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Just a question on the removal of B, 5B. Does that create any problems? You said it wasn't necessary, but would it interfere with designating approved transmission corridors if we don't have it?
No, it doesn't. It's a completely separate issue.
Okay.
And I think it highly unlikely that a transmission corridor would under existing kind of land conservation and so on be ever identified as such or acquired as such in this way. I think that what I've seen in other states is that they're looking if there is a synergy with a transmission project for a wildlife corridor, that at that time of developing that new project, that this might get looked at. But that is I just think it's such a different issue and not really central to what we're trying to do with connectivity and strongholds.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none at this time, thank you, Senator.
Thank you.
Mike Marson? And he's pretty ambivalent about this because you're not support or opposed, but you definitely want to speak on this. Right? Taking no position. We don't have that on the sheet.
Okay.
You have the floor.
Good afternoon, Chairman and members of the committee. Thank you for your time. Senator Waters' introduction covered a lot of my comments, so I'll keep this really short. So appreciate the time. Department did not take an official position on this bill, but I just wanted to share some information. As Senator Waters mentioned, the work that the department does aligns closely with the planning for wildlife corridors. The timing, as mentioned, was very tight and very good because we just released our wildlife action plan today and it was approved yesterday. So, and it does include the reference to wildlife corridors. So that is an important part of what we do. We've also worked on mapping and provided a variety of tools. And so we consider these tools that can be used in the planning process that these different entities, local, regional, can use in that process. We also have a great partnership with called the Taking Action for Wildlife program, where we provide these tools out to communities and land trusts and others so that they can use them with willing landowners to participate in this. And we developed that brochure as an example, that wildlife corridors brochure that I provided as a handout. The only additional consideration I would add is that under 5A, these are groups that we actively work with now, and we hope to continue to do that in the future. Just one consideration is the use of shall. The continued participation in that will be dependent on future federal funding that we've done. So one consideration might be whether that could be a may. But we intend to include, Section 5A, I believe, or Section 5. But we intend to include, to continue this work and wish to do that. So that'll end my testimony with that. Thank you.
Senator Waters with a question.
Thank you. I would think that we'd be happy to change shall to may, because it certainly is a kind of a cooperative
Page 3.
arrangement. The last page of the bill, on line 10.
Line 10.
So we certainly could change that shall to may.
Thank you.
Further questions? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you. Could you please identify yourself and say what department you're from?
Oh, I'm sorry. Michael Marchand. I'm the supervisor of the non-game and endangered wildlife program at New Hampshire Fish and Game.
Further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Jim O'Brien or John O'Brien? No, it's a John. Just change that to me.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fine.
I talked with him yesterday, very shortly yesterday.
You have the floor.
My name is Jim O'Brien.
Jim O'Brien, okay.
Deputy State Director of the Nature Conservancy here in New Hampshire. We're in support of this bill and believe that it is an important planning effort for our state. So I don't want to repeat what.
Oh, thank you. I don't want to repeat the comments made by Senator Waters or from Mr. Marchand. But what I will add is, the Nature Conservancy is an international nonprofit. And we have done a lot of science-based research and mapping here in across the Appalachian Mountains, from Georgia up to Maine, really studying migration patterns of wildlife, and have mapped out the corridors that connect sort of the larger pieces of intact habitats. And so they're a very important resource for our wildlife as they migrate north to south across the landscape. And New Hampshire is a really important part of that migration corridor. So enabling our local communities to integrate these into their landscape planning and our regional planning commissions, we feel is really important. These corridors aren't just at the municipal level, they are much larger than that. And so having regional planning take those into consideration as I think of their land use planning is essential to sort of protecting wildlife resources into the future. So happy to answer any questions.
Questions from the committee? Nope. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much.
Is there a Griffin Roach bird in here?
You're bad.
I know.
It's a unique way to say the last name.
How do I pronounce that?
Roberge.
Roberge.
Roberge. Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Griffin Roberge with Eversource Energy. I'll be brief. I do just want to say that Eversource has had positive conversations with Senator Waters on the second part of his amendment 0055S. In the original bill, there was some language about designating wildlife corridors, habitat strongholds, and approved transmission corridors. We felt some of the language was a little bit ambiguous, wasn't properly defined. Additionally, it did require the Fish and Game to consult with DOE and DES on the designation of these corridors and strongholds in approved transmission corridors subject to property owner agreement. As Senator Waters mentioned, we feel that that could give rise to conflict between, a property owner and maybe somebody who's holding a utility easement through which our infrastructure goes through. So removing that language, I think, is certainly helpful to us and allays, takes away our concerns with this bill. I would also say, Eversource is certainly, protective of the environment and wildlife habitats in our transmission corridors and everything. We certainly partner to the extent possible with various nonprofits like the New Hampshire Wildlife Federation and their efforts to protect turtle habitats and other species. So with that, I'm happy to answer any questions that folks might have. Otherwise, I'll let you move on.
Questions from the committee? So you're satisfied with the changes that have been made?
I'm satisfied with the changes in 0055S,
We
yes.
thank you, sir.
Thank you.
Seeing no other further questions. Barbara? Is it Ryder? I'm just batting zero today.
That's all right.
Welcome.
Well, thank you, Mr. Chair and members of the committee for the opportunity to provide testimony on Senate Bill 592. My name is Barbara Richter. I'm the Executive Director at the New Hampshire Association of Conservation Commissions. And NHACC is in support of this bill, and so we do ask you to vote ought to pass. This bill will help protect New Hampshire's wildlife by better coordinating state, regional, and local efforts to prioritize wildlife corridors that support these critical habitats and species. As mentioned, establishing wildlife corridors is essential in protecting New Hampshire's native wildlife. Connecting natural areas allows species to move between lands, and it's critical to the survival of many of our iconic species, as mentioned, moose, bobcat, and bear. And the importance of wildlife corridors has been mentioned in our New Hampshire State Wildlife Action Plan, and I just want to highlight that again. Chapter 5 mentions Goal 3.2 is to maintain and enhance landscape connectivity to support wildlife movement. And again, to help facilitate this protection of wildlife corridors, New Hampshire Fish and Game has created a New Hampshire Wildlife Corridors map, and I did include the link to this. I sent you an email earlier or yesterday, so if you want to check that out, you can click that in the link that I sent. Using the standard information and conservation planning will help increase efficiency between local and regional planning efforts. Calling out the importance of habitat strongholds and wildlife corridors in RSA 36A will clarify a Conservation Commission's responsibility to identify potential corridors and areas for protection and restoration. RSA 36A has required Conservation Commissions to identify local natural resources since 1963. And in order to protect those local natural resources, a commission must identify, map, and describe where on the landscape those natural resources occur. And it was noted earlier, but we do request that you replace the word index with inventory in 36A:2 to better reflect the terminology currently used by natural resource professionals. And again, a natural resource inventory identifies and describes those natural resources for regions or municipalities. And protecting New Hampshire's natural resources ultimately provides for the health and safety of New Hampshire residents by protecting drinking water sources, reducing the impacts of flooding, and preventing soil erosion, among other public benefits. So we do ask you to vote ought to pass on Senate Bill 592, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
Senator McConkey.
Thank you, madam. Perhaps you could help me understand this better. I'd asked the question earlier. I keep hearing the term prioritize,
Right.
trails, areas, habitats. So when the mapping is being done, whether it be done by the Conservation Commission, whether it be the good people in my town, are you only looking at, are you looking at a big picture? This would be ideal. Are you looking at these are publicly held properties or conservation easements? This is where it should be. I see a conflict coming through when a group of good intentioned and scientists come to a determination that that trail should go across someone's land, and it sounds to me like that land will no longer be able to be used for what a homeowner's intended. Is the intent, if that happens, that these great bodies of conservation commissions are going to purchase those rights? How do I protect the landowner?
Right. Well, keep in mind that land protection in New Hampshire is voluntary. So as a landowner, you can work with your local land trust, or you can work with your local town to either sell a conservation easement, sell a trail easement, or sell the property outright in full. But that's completely voluntary through that landowners, whatever their wishes and desires are. So there's this language will not somehow take away any of their landowner rights. They have the ability to sell or, adapt or build as they see fit. So this does stress the importance, though, of making those connections between really high priority areas. And when we talk about high priority areas, there are areas that have the significant natural resources that raise them to a higher level. And for instance, for the Wildlife Action Plan, you'll see the highest ranked habitat is only covering, certain portions of your community. It's not going to blanket, it doesn't make sense to protect every acre of New Hampshire. We need to protect the most valuable resources. So by identifying them, we know that this area is a location where a lot of species are going to thrive and do well in the future. So that's the area we want to protect. Other areas are more suitable for development. So by identifying what we need to protect, we're actually opening up areas for development that are more appropriate to a different, more intensive use.
Thank you, and I honestly appreciate that conversation. Not in my towns, of course, but I've known of towns that would take an initiative like this and then zone, take it down to a much local level, and that's what I fear. I'm hoping you're telling me that that's probably not the case here.
Again, it's going to be a building block for a town to create zoning that's most appropriate for where to put your roads, where to put your conservation lands. So by identifying those corridors, you may end up with zoning that's going to encourage that area to be protected. But as you know, zoning doesn't completely stop development from happening either. So it just brings it into the discussion of where is the best place to develop.
Thank you for indulging my
Sure.
question.
Of course.
So would this bill prevent local municipalities from zoning in certain areas?
No, I do not think so. This is actually going to help them better, zone based on data and not on, specific areas where people think they might want to, protect. This is based on data and less on subjective.
Rosenwald, did you have a question?
I'm just looking for where it might say that an RPC could overtake a landowner's property rights. And I can't find it in the bill. So,
Yeah, no, that's not going to, I can't imagine New Hampshire ever passing anything that would take that right away from a landowner.
Senator Waters?
Thank you. And Barbara, thanks so much for all the great work of the Conservation commissions around the state, just, terrific organizations locally and statewide. Would it be fair to say that really the work that's done is descriptive in that it just, well, that's where the wildlife are now, and that's where, when they travel, these are the ways they go, or are likely to go. And then also it is simply informational.
Absolutely. Like, I think this does just highlight the information that's important for communities to use. And as Nature Conservancy and Fish and Game have already said, a lot of this is already a priority for communities. Most communities prioritize wildlife and water as one of their critical resources to protect. But this will just give them more of a, more authority to be able to say, this is why we're doing what we do.
And if I may follow up. And would it be fair to say that an existing statute around this and other conservation areas, the existing statute does not contravene local private property rights in any way, nor would this change contravene private property rights in any way?
Yes, that's my interpretation as
Thank
well.
you.
Seeing no further questions, thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Matt Leahy from the Forest Society in support, not wishing to speak, and my final speaker, Jason Stock from the New Hampshire Timberlands Association. There he is. Welcome.
Thank you. For the record, I'm Jason Stock, Executive Director of the New Hampshire Timberland Owners Association, and I feel a little bit like the skunk at the garden party. I indicated that we have some concerns with this bill. I think some of them have been voiced here. When I brought it to my policy committee, and recognized my policy committee has landowners, foresters, loggers, wood processors on it. The first question that comes up is, all right, is this needed? What is the sponsor trying to do, etc. And there were a couple things that bubbled up out of that conversation, and I would like to reiterate some of the comments you heard earlier. Landowners and most timberland owners have an interest in wildlife. It comes with the trees. And they have an interest in special places, special areas. A lot of that is kind of private information that they want to keep. They don't want the world to know for a host of reasons. One, I may have a special area that is special to me and my family. I don't want it advertised. Hey, come check out this black gum swamp. And we start having parades of people, going onto a map or going onto a website and checking out my black gum swamp. That's kind of a special area for me and my family. The other is some of the concerns you heard earlier about land use. And although local municipal regulations almost always have typically no impact on forestry or timber harvesting, there are land uses that municipal regulations certainly do impact. And again, the concern that was raised, and it was a question more than I'll say it's a question as much as a concern, is, all right, I have a zoning map and I have an overlay district of some type, and I have a corridor or a sensitive area. We see this with prime wetlands already. Here's an overlay district. How does that affect my ability to do what I would like with the property? And then lastly, we recognize that there are some areas in here where we think there's some redundancy. And, the bill clearly has I'll say a laser focus on habitat strongholds and wildlife corridors. And if I look at page 1, line 10, that mentions ecological areas, the question that came up was, well, how is that different than a wild, how is that different? Where are we drawing attention to something that's already kind of addressed here? Line 26, it has the term conservation, including Well, again, our committee looked at this and said, well, conservation land includes a lot more than just wildlife strongholds and habitat corridors. And again, we're looking at, conservation includes a lot more than just that. Again, is this bill kind of focusing in on something that, is redundant or unnecessary, or frankly covered in other areas, i.e. the ecological? It's an existing law. Why would you need to add this to it? Conservation again occurs on page 2, lines 27. Again, the last page, page 3, paragraph 7, conservation including, well, why wouldn't you say it's just conservation. It's, again, why do we need to just focus on habitat strongholds? If the Regional Planning Commission deems that conservation is important, it should be for more than just this one particular use of conservation lands. And so those were some of the questions that kind of bubbled up. There was kind of the general, what are we trying to do here? Is there redundancy? And is there an implication to potential land use that we've seen with some other programs, which started as kind of a mapping program and kind of morphed into a regulatory land use program, i.e. prime wetlands, and so things like those were some of the concerns and questions that were raised. I'm happy to work with the sponsor and others and have conversations and bring our folks together to hopefully, if our concerns are unfounded, I would love to have those conversations and prove that. But right now, as the bill was drafted and with these concerns and questions, my directive today was to come here and say, hey, raise these concerns, questions, and let's have the dialogue. So with that, I'll conclude my testimony, and I certainly appreciate your indulgence this afternoon.
How would you address in language the privacy concerns?
The privacy concerns?
Yeah, you mentioned, I interpreted what you said about being.
Yeah, it's, we run into this frequently, and that is a tough one, because once something gets mapped, and holy cow, once it gets on the internet, it's out there. But I think we see this with the Natural Heritage Program, where they do a good job at kind of controlling data release and making sure that it's the landowner or authorized entities, and there's a process to do that, to kind of control who has that information. So I think to answer your question, Chairman Avard, I think there's a model already out there that kind of addresses this through the Natural Heritage Program.
So on the redundancy issues, and then I'll open it up to the rest of the committee. Is there an underlying worry about redundancy? Why?
Again, it was just the question was, why is ecological areas not sufficient to include wildlife travel corridors and strongholds? Again, these were just questions that were raised to say, why are we focusing on just this when we think of ecological areas, and it's just kind of how we view the world. We think of a lot more than just that, but it does include that as well.
So I'm going to let the horse out of the barn, Senator Waters.
Oh, no. Giddy up.
So thanks for the testimony, Jason, and I'm glad to work together.
Thank you.
I think that there's some pretty easy fixes to the things that you mentioned. But let me start off first with the privacy issue, because I recall not only on this, but some other things we worked on over the years, that it is quite clear that this legislation, nor existing statute, gives anybody the right to come onto private property. Isn't that correct?
Absolutely. That is correct.
Yeah.
This does not license or provide access.
Yeah. So a conservation commission, in creating its inventory, would not have any right now or under this to come onto somebody's property.
It is our understanding they cannot enter property to do that mapping.
Yeah, so, I understand the concern, but I think that, you know, I mean, if the Fish and Game creates a map or something, of the whole state or something, you know, I mean, I'm not really sure how that concern about somebody finding some habitat on your land or something, that this would change anything because it's already prohibited to come onto your land.
Thank you for the question. And I think, let me clarify, the privacy issue is less with, because you're right, there are protections to gathering the data. The privacy issue, and we see this with trails, we see this with other resources. Once the information is out, my land is unposted, and I should have probably been clearer. My land is not posted. The information gets out, and there's a pretty cool black gum swamp out there. And now it's on a map or it's in a database or on a website. Hey, check out Jason's black gum swamp. That's the privacy. That's the privacy issue that I've had landowners have expressed concern with, where it gets basically loved to death. You have an area that was a special area for you, your family, you think it's neat, it gets mapped, it gets released, and now you've lost that ability. I suppose the simple solution is post your land, which is something we try anything we can do to discourage that. But that's the scenario. And I apologize if I was misspoke, but it's less about Concom's coming on and gathering the data. But once it's out there,
So the
that's-
important question is, what is Black Gum Swamp?
I have to be careful because there's some biologists in the room. It's a very unique, it's a very unique tree. It's a very unique habitat.
Lives hundreds and hundreds of years.
Yeah, and it's a really cool thing to see.
You have
And
one of those?
what's that? I don't have one.
That's in Barrington. If I may follow up. So to the next issue, wouldn't it be fair to say that ecological area is not the same as habitat stronghold or wildlife corridor, in that the reason for the definition that were included in statute starting in 2019 was that a corridor may not itself be defined as an ecological area per se, and a habitat stronghold is, I mean, everything's an ecological area, but a habitat stronghold is a particular type of ecology that is defined now in statute. And so would you understand why there's a clarification of definition then in that?
I suppose, I guess when we, and the folks that are on this committee with me that are land use, the practitioners, they're foresters, they tend to lump. They're lumpers as opposed to splitters when it comes to definitions. They look at a client's property and they say, where are the special areas or ecological areas? Less, is it an ecological or special area for this specific purpose? So I guess it's a difference of how you view it, how you view landscape management, landscape land use in general.
And my last one is, so on the RPCs and the word conservation, I'm not sure that the word conservation is really necessary, in that this could be changed. Instead of saying land conservation areas including, it could be changed to say habitat strongholds as defined in and so on, so that if they're worried about, would that address some of your worries about the camel's nose or slippery slope or anything else? Because the point here is not overall conservation of every kind. It's when they're doing their regional projects, but a lot of times have to do with transportation. I mean, this is really about transportation projects. And that's something that's already in statute about looking at transportation projects in terms of wildlife corridors because of vehicle strikes and this and that and the other thing. So Would that help to narrow the focus for you?
I'd have to take, and I apologize, I'm trying to talk and read here at the same time. So I'd have to take a look at it is this the page 3, line 3?
Well, it's a couple of places. Notice the bottom of page 2, it's in the RPC sections. So
Okay.
bottom of the first page it says conservation including, and then on page 2 it says conservation, and then conservation areas including. And then on page 3, 7, it says conservation including. And I would say that if the word is conservation you're worried about, and I want to focus on habitat strongholds and corridors, that's easy enough to change.
Sure.
So we can talk.
Yes, thank you.
So
Yeah,
I'm gonna execute probably next week, so if you can work it out by next week, that would be great.
thank you.
And any further questions? Wonderful. And we're gonna put the horse back in the barn, and we're gonna close the hearing on this. And we're gonna open up the next hearing to SB 540. We'll wait for the prime sponsor when he's ready. Do you have any more proposals? Bring them up. Is there anything we want? It's hard anyway. So I'm gonna give the prime sponsor as much time as he needs, but I'm gonna limit some folks to a little bit about 3 minutes, only because we have a lot of you. And so if we can just kind of, if you got written testimony, I'm gonna ask you to submit it and talk from your heart. And if you've seen if somebody's already said something, I'm gonna ask you to, again, speak from your heart, but just be courteous because there's another speaker that's right behind you. And with that, Senator Waters, you have the floor.
Thank you very much, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee, Senator David Waters, District 4, an act introducing Senate Bill 540, an act relative to portable solar generation devices. Please note, colleagues, that there is an amendment 0017, which is a replace all. Makes a couple of technical corrections and a change about rulemaking. So I will speak from the amended version if you do have that.
Do we have a lot of those around? If there's extra copies for the audience, they're on the table. So with that, Senator, I apologize. Go ahead.
So what this bill does is it defines portable solar generation device and enables people to acquire these devices so they can perhaps immediately cut their energy bills and provide some small amount of independence in their energy supply. It also provides appropriate safety standards, and it makes sure that there's no electric distribution utility liability for it. This bill was inspired by movement in several other states to see what can be done about the cost of electricity and to let people who may not be homeowners and may not be able to put a larger solar installment on top of their houses or elsewhere, that they can have rather small portable plug-in solar devices. If you go onto Amazon.com or go to Home Depot, you will find that there's all sorts of these things you can buy and plug in. Sometimes you can also run a battery storage generator device on it for backup power that way. But simply these devices are made so you can plug them in, put them outside over, drape them over a rail or hang them out a window or other kind of display, and that you can generate some power and you plug it in and it goes in and reduces the amount of power that you're using. So very simple devices, and they provide people with the possibility of generating some small amount of power to do that. And I think in some very fundamental ways, this is about economic freedom, and it's about personal freedom as well. I will note that a lot of people already are getting these, and they're out there, and I think that's why it's important for us to have something in statute that sets some of the safety standards and also provides needed information to the utilities as to who has one of these and how much power potentially might be coming into the grid from them. If they're aggregated, if thousands of people start to have them, that can affect how much power is available to the grid. So that said, Mr. Chairman, I'm going to go through some of the details of the bill. Important here to define a portable solar generation device. It's a movable photovoltaic generation device and here one of the first changes has a maximum power output not exceeding 800 watts. That has changed from 1200 watts in the original. The 1200 did seem to raise some issues about capacity and connections and wiring in homes, and by going down to the 800, I think we have addressed that sufficiently. That it would take no special new wiring. It can be plugged into a standard 120 volt receptacle and is intended primarily to offset a portion of the customer's on-site electric consumption. Then the second important thing here is to say that this is not net metering. These are small devices. They are exempt from interconnection requirements because it's just plugged in. They have an inverter within them. And interconnection agreements applicable to generators participating in net metering. So this is small. It's outside of net metering, and it would not be subject to the net energy metering provisions of RSA 362A9. This is how it's being done in other states, and let somebody who just wants to plug one of these in not have to go through all that utility regulation. Thirdly, starting on line 19, here is the safety factor for the UL listings. I think it's important to note here that while I have listed the current standards under which these devices are sold from the UL or the IEEE, I have included the phrase successor standard because there may well be another successor standard. They're going to building codes, or the fire marshal might want. I think there's one UL 3700 I heard from Mike that is being developed and would eventually probably be a good thing to have, but that's why it says successor standard, so that that becomes the new standard. This will make sure that these devices are covered as well. Also important for safety, the anti-islanding protection and rapid shutdown. So that if there's a shutdown of the grid, these things aren't still putting power into it. And then continuing line 23, again, regulatory paperwork, preventive, ways of preventing people, potentially from being able to do this. You don't need utility approval ahead of time. You don't have to pay any fee or charge on this. You don't have any utility specific controls on that. These are small enough. Those things aren't needed. Importantly, however, on line 29, the addition in this amendment of registering it. It is important for the utilities, I heard from Eversource and others, that they need to know what's out there because, any one of these is small, 800 watts, but let's say you have 1,000 people in a service area who suddenly have them. The utility needs to know potentially what is out there might be coming into the grid from these things. So what this requires here, the 30 days, you have to register that device. And it should be for only notification purposes only, not require approval and so forth. Then on the last page, here is where we cover the codes. So current codes and then codes that come in the future. If they include these devices in some way, yes, they do have to be installed in accordance with those to make sure we have safety. Then section 3, these things, since they're not regulated by the utilities have no liability around them. Then lastly, you notice what has been omitted and taken out is the PUC rulemaking. That did produce something of a physical note, as I'm sure you've seen. But with the changes made in this draft, there's no longer any need for PUC rulemaking, because I think we have addressed sufficiently all the issues that might have come up in rulemaking by the provisions within the language itself. Power to the people, you know? And as I said, these are increasingly popular, and people are starting to get them, and I think it's important to make sure that they can do so without being encumbered by regulation, but they also have safe devices as well. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Thank you, Senator Waters. Questions from Senator Rosenwald?
Thank you. Thank you. So I can't help looking at fiscal notes. And I noticed that even though you don't have the act start until halfway through fiscal year 27, DOE included costs for an entire year of an attorney and somebody else. By removing rulemaking, do you remove the entire cost so we don't need to delay the effective date? Which is the other way we could do it.
I think, let me think about that. I think that it might be good to have the effective date delayed a little bit. The kind of registration process and anything else that people want to look at this to make sure. But not necessarily. But I'd be more comfortable with it remaining to January 1st of 27.
You would.
Yes, but I do think that what we've done here with getting rid of the rulemaking obviates the need for the fiscal note.
Okay, so no fiscal.
Senator McCarthy?
Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Senator Waters. I'm a simple guy, so what you're telling me here is, I live in an apartment, I live in my house, I plop a couple solar panels onto my deck, and it's feeding a unit that has no more than 800 watt that's going to generate. Is this intended that I would plug directly into my source, or do I need to feed this into my system?
You can do two things. You can just plug it into the wall and it'll reduce the power, your power needs. Or, as you'll see, if you go on Amazon or elsewhere, you can plug it into a generator, a battery storage, so you can charge up the generator, or you can use it to charge up various devices. So those are the options available to you.
Could it be something as simple as I'm plugging my refrigerator into it? Or is it a more complicated process that it has to be tied into? I have a much larger gas generator. I can't tell you how many watts. In the event that we have a power failure, we take it out, we plug it in, we fire it up, we plug it into our system. Yeah, is that the intent of this, but with a much smaller unit?
Well, what you can do, and there are some folks who have more expertise in this, but what you can buy is a generator with some storage capacity. So if you want it, the solar panel is a solar panel, and it's got an inverter in it, and it's got some wiring, a plug that comes out of another wiring as well.
Right.
You could put it into the wall, as I said, or if you wanted to charge up that generator with it,
Okay.
you could do that, and you can plug your refrigerator into that, as you would with any kind of generator that you may have, however it's powered.
Thank you, sir. Thank you, Mr. Chair.
Yeah, I have a generator too, and I have to shut off my breakers, hit another switch, plug in my generator, and crank her up, and everything's happy-go-lucky. Is this similar to that? If I plug in, and like you said, there are 500 people that are doing the same thing, are we gonna have like a surge of, are we gonna overload the system?
Well, as I said, this bill is about the solar panels themselves, okay? That's what it's about. Now, what you do with the power that comes out of those solar panels is up to you. Whether you want to power a generator with it, use the way you would another generator, that's up to you. If you want to plug it into the wall, that's up to you. The bill just deals with the generation of power through the panels.
Okay. Thank you, Senator. Appreciate it. No further questions? Megan? Megan and Mike? It's the M&M show. Megan's with the New Hampshire Department of Energy and very neutral on this. And Mike, your last name again is? Susi, Michael Susi. Welcome, and we appreciate you being here.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. I'm Meg Stone, Department of Energy. We have a letter going around that lists some safety concerns that we have with the bill, but to save some time, I can you can read that, and then if you have any questions on that, we'd be happy to take those. And I can just go into a few suggestions that we have for the bill, if that works. So as Senator Waters mentioned, Underwriters Laboratory has developed UL 3700, which is not standard yet, and provides safety requirements. So the department does recommend incorporating this somewhere, which I think Senator Waters has addressed in his amendment. And I know that there are others here, such as the Building Code Review Board, that can go more into how those may be implemented. Additionally, in section 2, line 17 and 18, and this is in the original bill, not the amendment. The bill states a portable solar generation device that shall comply with UL 1741 or IEEE 1547. We do recommend that or being changed to and, which is referenced in the National Electric Code.
I'm sorry, this is on his amendment, right?
No, on
Use
the
both
original
places.
bill. I'm sorry,
Single.
my remarks are on the original bill.
Okay.
And then the amendment did remove the rulemaking part of it, but we would suggest that if that comes back at any time, it did have the Public Utilities Commission mentioned. We believe it should be the Department of Energy if you were to include rulemaking, and we should be able to do this without any additional staff.
Got that, Josh? All right. You like Josh or Joshua?
Can I say?
Joshua. Senator Waters.
So noted.
Yeah, I just wanted to clarify, and thank you so much for the help on this, and we can talk after the hearing too. But would your recommendation be on 3700? We haven't adopted that yet, but would you be happier if it were listed here on line 18?
Yes, Senator Waters. I believe this will become the standard. This is UL's first. It's defined as an outline of investigation, and it lists it's about 40 pages, and it lists recommendations that, it lists all the different UL requirements that would be necessary, as along with 1741, and different installation methods for the branch circuit to protect the branch circuit. If it's added in there, that I think it would be better.
Okay.
But it's also something we can probably address, and I think Mr. Sherman will speak to that at the Building Code Review Board versus putting it in legislation. So that's something we can discuss.
Can we do all these changes before next week?
Yeah, I mean, I'm, if I may, Mr. Chairman, Paul, so we can talk about, I would just assume if you think it's wise to just put it in here now, so we would list it, the UL 1741, UL 3700, and IEEE 1547 standards?
As long as there's not a problem adopting it, whereas it's not a standard. Right now, it is an outline of investigation. It will become the standard, but it has to go through that process.
All right, so I guess if I may, Paul.
Yeah.
I mean, this is why we had the phrase about the future standards in there, and I thought that would cover the 3700. So it's awkward, because I don't know, I mean, your advice on what we actually do need to do, rather than.
Either way, I think it's going to trigger an amendment to the building code. And when Mr. Sherman comes up, he can speak to maybe that's a better route to go versus putting it in the legislation. Either way, we're going to have to do something at the Building Code Review Board with the building code to address, UL 3700 does address all the safety concerns. And I believe makes these systems, you can install them without concern of the safety issues.
Thank you.
Senator Rosenwald.
Mr. Chairman, the UL 3700, would only portable solar generators use them, or might other devices also need to meet them that would trigger a building code review?
No, this 3700 specifically addresses plug-in photovoltaic systems.
Portable one?
Photovoltaic, PIPV is the acronym for these balcony solar or plug-in photovoltaic systems.
It's Vodafall?
Well, photovoltaic,
Photovol. Okay, gotcha. Thank you.
plug-in solar.
Could I ask
Follow
another
up.
question? Thank you.
The National Electrical Code already addresses photovoltaic systems and interconnecting into, an existing system. But it doesn't really address these plug-in systems. 3700 brings all that to surface, and that'll probably be a lot of stuff that the building codes will adopt. It's just gonna take time for it to get through the building code process.
And if I can ask about touch potential, the way I'm reading this is that I might get a shock from plugging
When
this
you,
into the wall.
when you unplug the system, the inverter could be on for a couple more seconds. So like if you have your generator and, the old fashioned way was to backfeed your dryer plug with a cord, those prongs are energized. Right, so now we have a safe way to plug our generators in and run them safely. These systems are safe, and maybe they already have addressed, but there is the touch potential on that cord as you unplug it. And IEEE does, I think, allow for like 2 seconds. These systems may have already addressed it, and the standard just has to be updated, but it is an issue.
Wear rubber gloves. Just kidding.
Can I follow up?
I'm just,
I mean, would this be worse than touching any live plug?
There is a shock
That's
hazard.
110.
There is always a shock hazard of touching anything, but when you unplug these systems, they're supposed to shut off. That's part of the anti-islanding. When the grid goes down, these things turn off. So you unplug it from the grid, it shuts down. It may just take a second or two where those prongs are still energized. And 3700 addresses that also.
seeing no further questions, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Chairman. Just hit the button, if you please. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the committee. My name is Philip Sherman. I'm the chair of the State Building Code Review Board. In mid-December, Mike Hagan from our board, who also is a member of the Building Officials Association, and I participated in an introductory Zoom with Nick Paul from Clean Energy on this topic and this bill. Since then, we've had some members of our board, including Mike Susi, take a look at the proposed legislation and the reference material that's available on the products. These devices are apparently in common use in Europe, so let me start by saying that I see it as our job to find a way to create a path for use in New Hampshire. We're not at all resisting these. However, as these feed power into the system differently than other auxiliary power sources downstream from the circuit breaker, the typical connection arrangements for additional power supplies are not entirely applicable. So this is feeding power from the backside of a breaker, whereas your home generator is feeding it from the front side, upstream, right? I will speak to parts 2 and 4 of the bill, and I believe part 4 turned into part 5 in the amendment, although I just took a quick glance at it. So part 2 requires compliance with certain safety standards, as was previously mentioned, but it's my understanding that the standards that are referenced do not address these units specifically, and that the devices present electrical hazards that are not addressed by the cited standards, as protection for electrical systems in the U.S. is different than what's used in Europe. Specifically with regard to ground fault detection. and Mike is better able than I to explain one-way versus two-way power through a ground fault. Part 4 requires compliance with the building and the electrical code. In fact, the electrical code is part of the state building code. Aside from questions as to whether these are portable devices that at times may not be covered by the code at all, the National Electric Code, which is the model code, the reference standard that we base our state code on, does not address backfeeding power into a circuit currently. Worse, there are some existing code provisions that local authorities might enforce improperly while they're on the search for what to do about these things, given that there's no explicit direction on these devices. Lastly, as Mike mentioned, Underwriters Labs has done a preliminary study resulting in UL 3700. Well, this document may provide a first pass sort of a route for compliance. Once a traditional UL standard is developed, this document will no longer stand. And I understand the language in the bill, or I guess in the amendment, that tries to account for the future documents. Writing hard requirements into statutes makes it difficult to keep up with the move to a more permanent approval process. Let me give you a very quick example. My understanding is that UL 3700 basically requires a unique plug and cap arrangement. So it would be a vendor specific, you put this on your wall, this is the only thing that will go into that outlet. The bill as it stands requires these to be plugged into an ordinary 110 volt outlet. So that's just something that would need to be resolved. For all of these reasons, I ask that we be given time to work with all of the interested parties, perhaps a couple of months, to review the available research, review where things stand at the UL and otherwise at the national level, and come back to you with a proposed approach that would permit these devices to be used while reasonably protecting life and property. Thank you, and I'm happy to answer any questions.
This is an FN bill. I don't know if we have a couple of months, do we?
How much time do you have?
There's going to be no fiscal note
I
anymore.
mean, if we were to amend it, remove the rulemaking, and that would eliminate the cost, it would still be subject to the early bill deadline, though. So it could get waived from finance, but
Well, we can put in a
amended
late-
on the floor.
Put in a late bill. That's the 15th.
If I may ask a question.
Certainly.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. You heard from the earlier conversation that we don't have UL 3700 at this point in time to
In the
reference
bill.
Instead, well, if it's not been adopted by you, referencing it in statute, would you prefer that? Or would you like the language in the amendment which says successor standards would be recognized?
If the bill is to move forward quickly, clearly putting 3700 in there is better than not.
Okay.
However, there's a conflict with at least with the outlet thing, with the plug. The bill as it stands required, it's an ordinary 110 volt plug. 3700 does not permit that. So those are the kinds of things that even a short number of days or weeks, getting multiple eyes on these, that's how we flush this stuff to the surface and then come back with something that works, right?
Yeah, if I may. So I just, I wanted to mention that the state of Utah's bill was passed. It's in practice. It references the two standards that were in this bill. People are buying them, using them, and so forth. And I will also note that these are in pretty frequent use already in the state of New Hampshire. So I'm not sure I think that we are at more risk by delaying this than we are by getting what we can in place now. Would that make some sense to you?
I know nothing about the Utah code process, although it's a beautiful state having traveled there, and they have very high speed limits. However, these units, if I understand it correctly, are primarily sold for campers. They're a way to pull into a campground and provide 110 volt
power. They can be used the way this bill intends, and I understand the need to deal with the regulations so that that can be done safely. But there are other problems powering up my house that I don't have if I just plug a refrigerator into one of these things. And all we're asking for is the time to get DOE, the electricians, our board on this thing to really see if we can flush this to the surface. And if 2 months is too much, tell us what it'll work and we'll make it work. And come back to you with some of these conflicts ironed out. Not at all trying to get in the way of what you're trying to accomplish here.
Well, thank you so much, and I'd be glad to work with you, and we'll
Yeah.
see what we can do.
I mean, just the question right now as to whether the state building code even regulates these things is yet to be answered. We asked that of the industry and we haven't heard back from them yet.
Senator Waters, Wilson.
Thank you. So, I mean, I could go on Amazon right now and buy a 200-watt portable solar panel for $199. Maybe it's supposed to be used in my camper, but nobody is going to know if I'm using it in a camper or I'm plugging it into an outside outlet on my balcony. So wouldn't it be better to have some safety standards in place versus the current situation where, as Senator Waters said, people are buying them in New Hampshire, using them in New Hampshire, and it's like the Wild West because we don't know.
Agree fully. All I'm suggesting is we need some little bit of time to get the multiple eyes, each party having different expertise on this. And again, I'm referring to parts 2 and 4, which are sort of the mechanics of how these fit into the circuit, not the regulatory stuff with the power company and all of that. But I agree with you fully. We need some regulations that make some sense.
Thank you.
Questions? Thank you very much for your testimony.
Thank you.
Peter Adlock, is that right? Peter? I think that's a Peter.
Would it be Peggy Elmo, perhaps?
That's it, that's even better.
Probably be.
You know what, I'm gonna get everybody's name in here wrong today. So, but if you identify with that, please come on up.
Peggy Elmo.
Yes, sir.
You're off to a good start,
I
Mr. Chair.
just got 0. I am dyslexic, so I can use that.
If I might circulate one of these things?
As long as we don't get zapped.
It's alive.
And just hit your button.
My name is Penty Alto, Pembroke, New Hampshire. My background has been for many years in the area between technology and policy, starting with interconnection issues in the early 70s with FERPA regulations, moving on to working with New York State on their interconnection standards for small systems less than 1 megawatt, and I've been involved with PUC here with net metering issues and so on. The piece that I'm circulating is a device that is UL approved for use in rooftop and other types of solar systems. The only difference between that and what we're talking about is the plug. This one plugs in hardwired into the house wire, and it directly takes the power from a low voltage panel, turns it to 120 or 250 or 240. It'll do either. 240 would be better because it's more balanced in the system. If you tried to plug your refrigerator into it, it would not work. These do not provide power independently of a synchronous source in the system. So from that point of view, they're safe. There are all of the UL, there are several UL and IEEE standards that are met by this unit. And again, the only difference is the plug. Now, the question, and is obviously the questions here are safety, effects on the grid, and possible issues of what's that power worth if I do turn the meter backwards, so to speak. And we need to think about the definitions a bit. If we're talking about interconnection, these are interconnected. The issue is that is clear on a sunny day, this may make more power than you're using. And if it's connected to the house wires, it goes straight out through the meter backwards out into the wires on the street, just like any other solar system would do. And it has all of the same safety functions built in. Now, the issue of the plug, that is one of the differences here. If I pull the plug out and then grab the ends of it, am I going to get electrocuted? Generally, no, because this thing shuts down very quickly. And the modern standards are even faster. For a complete drop in voltage, they drop very quickly. If it's just a reduction in voltage, they will, in the newer standards, they will stay on because they're intended to provide grid support at low voltages for a few seconds, and then they will disconnect. But if you unplug it, it's gone. And that's the anti-islanding function. The function of that is to make sure that it does not generate electricity when the grid is down, because that would enliven portions of the system and would be dangerous to line workers. The other areas are of safety at the other end of the system. A normal rooftop or backyard solar system uses what design called stringing the panels together in series. Each panel's voltage adds to the next. What that does is that could generally be up to 600 volts DC. And for that, I think you want somebody that knows what they're doing. The only exception to that in the past has been this device. If your panels are in different areas or have shading issues or something like that, a small amount of shading dramatically reduces the power output of a set of panels. This is one of the solutions to that. Individually take the power from the panels, turn it directly into AC and put it on the house wires. That's what this does. And so that each of the panels works independently, maximizes its output to try to work in an area where there is difficulty getting the power out.
Okay, with regards to this bill,
With regard to the bill, I support it. I would argue that we need to take a look at some of the definitions. The 120, 240 issue, if you got a 240 plug outside, probably would be better to get a 240 system. These are at the low voltages. They're just to finish that part, are 12 volts. Most of the off-grid solar, the camper solar and such, generally stay below 48 volts DC. These are, and that is, all electricity can be dangerous, but that's so again, I would support this. I would take a look at the capacity levels because that has an influence on utility planning. My sense is there are two things that apply. The normal IEEE and UL standards, more the IEEE standards, set voltage ranges of operation. If too many of these get plugged into a system, the voltage rises and they will disconnect automatically. So that function is already kind of built in, but it's still it would be good for the utility to have a sense that you're using it, so you might want to register it.
any questions from the committee? Right, thank you very much for your
Okay,
testimony.
glad to be of any assistance if there's any need.
Right, thank you. Right. And Dina, please be right. It's Dina, right? All right.
Check.
I'm on track now. Here we go. We still have a lot of speakers, so I'm not gonna try to. Why
And
you gotta try to-
I'll try to be efficient here. So good afternoon, Chairman Abard, members of the committee. Thank you for your time and attention today. My name is Dina Dennis. I'm Director of Regulatory and Legislative Affairs with the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire, also known as CPCNH. CPCNH is New Hampshire's only statewide joint powers agency, serving nearly 70 member municipalities and counties that have chosen to participate in what's called community power aggregation. Today, the Community Power Coalition is serving about 175,000 customers across the state. And since launching Community Power nearly 3 years ago, our member communities have helped customers save more than $16 million on their electricity bills and have provided meaningful choices for their energy supply. CPCNH supports House Senate Bill 540 FN as introduced because it's a common sense, pro-consumer bill that expands energy freedom and gives Granite Staters more practical tools to manage rising energy costs. At its core, Senate Bill 540 says this: if a customer wants to safely plug in a small portable solar device to offset a portion of their electricity, the law should not get in the way. So 3 brief points that I'll make. The bill expands customer choice without mandates or subsidies. These devices are privately owned. They're owned by the customers. They're voluntary. Utilities are not required to buy the power, like through net metering, and there's no cost shifting to other ratepayers. So essentially, customers assume both the cost and the benefit. Senate Bill 540 helps lower energy bills by displacing grid electricity. These devices reduce the amount of power that a household, especially those who are renters, or small businesses need to buy from the grid, especially during daytime hours when demand is usually the highest. That's good for customers, and at scale can help reduce peak demand pressures across the entire system. And then third, the bill promotes innovation while maintaining safety and utility protections. It draws a clear line between small, portable devices and permanent generation. It establishes safety standards, which sounds like maybe there needs to be some refinement through an amendment. It limits utility liability and authorizes the PUC to adopt reasonable rules, all while avoiding unnecessary interconnection and net metering requirements that were never designed for this kind of technology in the first place. As previously mentioned by some of the others, the state of Utah has already adopted this similar bipartisan legislation. I believe there are other states that are considering it this year, and I'm also aware that this is more of a common thing in the European Union, I think, especially in Germany. So they've done this and essentially recognized that small-scale customer innovation should not be regulated like large infrastructure projects. So in short, this bill is a no-brainer. It aligns with New Hampshire's longstanding commitment to energy freedom, market competition, customer choice, while helping residents and businesses take modest, practical steps to lower their energy costs. So for these reasons, the Community Power Coalition urges you to pass, or recommend ought to pass on this bill.
Thank you for your
Thank you.
testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none, well done. Rob Warner.
Members of the committee, my name is Rob Werner. I'm the state director here in New Hampshire for the League of Conservation Voters. I will be brief, but I think this is a great opportunity for the folks in New Hampshire in this way, and that so often our citizens ask, how can government, how can the people that I elect help me make my life better? This is a prime way of doing it. Energy costs are acute. They will continue to be acute and rising, particularly for low-income folks in our state. And this is a way to materially help them. So I'd urge the committee and the full Senate later on to pass this bill. I really think it is at base pro-consumer and pro-reduction of cost. So I urge you to support the folks in New Hampshire in this way. Thank you.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions? Seeing none, well done. Mr. Griffin Roberge. Did I get it right this time?
On the mark. Thank you, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. Again, Griffin Roberge with Eversource Energy. I'll be very brief. We did have some conversations with Senator Waters on potential changes that are outlined in his amendment 0017S. We do think that those are positive developments. However, we do continue to get internal feedback from technical experts inside our company, and we certainly welcome further discussion with Senator Waters on some potential other changes going forward. Happy to leave my testimony there, and happy to take any questions.
Questions from the committee? Thank you, sir.
Thank
Appreciate
you.
it. We really appreciate you, Griff. Nick? Nick. I'm not gonna screw it up.
Yeah, thank you. I'm Nick Krakoff. I'm a senior attorney with the Conservation Law Foundation. Appreciate being here today to talk about 540 and why you should support the bill. CLF is a nonprofit environmental advocacy organization. We work in New Hampshire and across the region. I'm also going to hand out some written comments today. I encourage you to read those as well. One of the main reasons to support SB 540 is that it will help address the affordability crisis by helping to reduce energy bills. We're all aware of how much energy bills have increased in the state over the past few years. And energy burdens, or the percentage that a household spends on energy costs, has also risen substantially. Through allowing the installation of plug-in solar devices up to 800 watts under the amendment, SB 540 provides an opportunity to lower household energy costs. Installing a single 400-watt solar panel can save a household about $10 a month on their electricity bill. And installing two 400-watt solar panels, that's about $20 a month in savings. Therefore, plug-in solar can provide real savings to households on their energy bills and provide energy independence for households. Another thing to note is that, as Community Power Coalition already noted, SB 540 can improve grid reliability in the state and the region. ISO New England studies have shown that behind-the-meter solar is critical to mitigating winter shortfalls of energy, as well as reducing system peaks during the summer. So, it can contribute to that as well, even if it's a small amount. In the aggregate, it can help improve grid reliability. Finally, as noted, there are several necessary safety provisions in the bill. I won't get into those in detail, but I do note that the Utah bill had very similar safety provisions, and that bill was enacted last year. Thank you very much. I urge you to support the bill and happy to answer any questions.
Thank you. Any questions from the committee? Seeing none, appreciate it. Appreciate you being concise.
Thank you.
Still have some more speakers here. Alec? And you represent Unitil?
I do represent Unitil. Good afternoon. For the record, my name is Alec O'Mara. I'm the Director of External Affairs at Unitil. I think overall, we have some concerns with the bill as it is written, though I think in spirit, we would like to see a way for this bill to ultimately go forward. The first thing it made me think of when I first read the bill was my grandfather used to have an old yellow Zenith little wind turbine on top of his garage, and he used that to run a radio. I say used it to run the radio. I think I saw it work maybe once or twice over its lifetime. I'm sure these work a lot better than that. But ultimately, the big difference between that device and this device is that this does interconnect to the system, and it does ultimately have the potential to put energy onto the system, which is where our concerns primarily lie. Ultimately, our engineering folks are looking at these devices, and we want to make sure that if they are, say, adopted at scale, we know where they are on the system and what potential load is being put onto our system. We saw that the amendment does lower the cap on these devices in terms of their overall usage, but one of the concerns our engineering team had as part of that is while the bill speaks to a cap on the size of a device, it doesn't speak to how many devices one person could potentially use. we would be concerned of a person maybe having like 3 or 4 of these things on their property, potentially circumventing the idea of the net metering process and just having a whole bunch of these all at once. To that same point, the way our metering works is if a customer is already a net metering customer and they were to say plug one of these devices in, there's no real way for the meter to be able to discern what credits are being generated by the actual solar panel that's been properly interconnected and this, which would have no interconnection. So it could potentially be an unauthorized way to expand the overall size of a solar array within a property. I don't have a real good answer as how to solve that one. Primarily, we did think that if there was an overall cap on the number of devices that an individual could potentially use, that could be a good solution since these devices are so small. That would overall lower the potential effect, though that effect would still exist. And I think it's important to just sort of acknowledge that the more of these that get used, the more there's going to be energy getting put onto a two-way system that we're managing that we need to be able to keep an eye on, regulate, and make sure it's going to be benefiting all of our customers. Excuse me. Happy to answer any questions anyone may have.
Yeah.
So, I'm glad, the registry I think is important.
Yes, I saw that. I think that would help.
Takes care of it. So the question would be of us saying that perhaps, each one, we've reduced it from 1,200 watts to 800.
Yep.
And I think that obviates some of the safety concerns that were raised earlier. But also you are suggesting that maybe we ought to have an aggregate cap as well.
I think that might be wise. For instance, 8 versus 12 is helpful in terms of the individual and perhaps helps from the safety perspective, but that's still 3 versus 2 if you're going to just keep buying them and you're going to end up at the same number. So I think that's a way that we were looking at that.
Okay, thank you.
Well, what about a multi-family, you get 5 apartments? Should each one only be limited to one, or how would that work?
It's a fair question. And I think that's sort of where we're at, because that could all be going to the same transformer, right? If depending on how that multifamily home is designed and integrated with the system. Those are the kinds of questions that get answered when, say, if that apartment complex as a whole was to, say, seek interconnection for a large solar array, right? Then what the engineering team is doing and the process that's supposed to happen there is they're looking at the potential load of that system as a whole. They're looking at how that could potentially affect the circuit around it, the transformer that might feed into. So say there is an apartment complex and everybody gets one of those things. That's effectively a very large solar array that's getting on there. Our engineering folks would need to be able to look at that and see what kinds of improvements may be needed on that system, and then what sort of cost that might incur. And then, that's what the purpose of interconnection and approval is.
Yeah, follow.
Interesting point. I mean, who can predict the future and what people are going to want to do?
Yep.
The bill is silent as to whether or not homeowners associations or landlords or whatever can say yes or no to these things. But wouldn't a registry, because it would be at the same address, indicate to you how many are at an individual address, and wouldn't you then potentially know what impact that might have on a transformer?
Registration would absolutely help, and I appreciate seeing that within the amendment. I think that that's a good step in the right direction. The question our engineering folks would have is, in the event that this does lead to some form of a need for system improvements there, like with a large solar array, what recourse would the registration create for us to be able to manage that? Yeah.
Thank you.
You're welcome.
And could somebody bypass that registration? Any further questions? Seeing none, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Sam? Barbara, you didn't ask to speak, so you just said in support, and I don't see you in the audience anymore, so never mind. We have one more.
And I can hear by the tone of your voice, Mr. Chair, that I should be brief.
See my body language.
Sam Brown, Executive Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire. We've been working extensively on this bill with Senator Waters.
You mentioned your name.
Sam Evans Brown, Executive Director of Clean Energy New Hampshire. Apologies, I do have a tendency to talk too fast. Most of what I had to say about this bill has been said already. You know, this is an opportunity to expand the access to the, you know, the low-cost solar energy that has been available to homeowners for a long time, to more folks. You know, National Renewable Energy Lab finds that 42% of Americans are not able to access the benefits of behind-the-meter solar because they're renters, because their roof is not suitable. And so we see this as a pretty modest step forward that would provide some savings to those types of folks. So we are in support. I'll just note a couple other things. You know, we heard about Germany. Germany was the first country to enable plug-in solar. There's 4 gigawatts of these types of devices on the grid in Germany. There have been no associated fires. There have been no grid reliability problems to our knowledge. In relation to that, there is a registration process in place in Germany, so we do think that that's a common sense step that we could take as part of the amendment that has been introduced. I also would like to talk about UL 3700. We just learned about the, you know, we had been hearing that the Underwriters Laboratory was going to create a proceeding that was going to create a standard all fall. And we just learned that that proceeding has now been opened a couple weeks ago. So this is new information that we didn't have when the bill was drafted. It's great news, in my opinion. I'm very open to continuing to work with the folks at the Utilities and the Building Code Review Board to come up with legislation that could appropriately reference that standard. My understanding, this is somewhat through the grapevine, and I think we should get it straight from the horse's mouth. We should go to UL and ask this, is that the standard that is ultimately adopted will have that same number. It will have the number UL 3700 that will replace the investigation that is ongoing. So if it is the desire of the Senate to put that number into statute and then theoretically keep the language or a successor standard to retain the flexibility of the statute, my understanding is currently that would not necessarily be problematic because that is the number that will ultimately come to reside in the UL books. Lastly, the one other note, we heard concern from the utilities about what if a net metered customer were to plug one of these into their home in order to expand their array. The Public Utilities Commission has an order, a standing order that governs how systems are to be treated when they expand, and the size of these devices is such that it would never trigger any of the changes in customer, whether they're required to jump from net metering 1.0 to 2.0, whether they're required to jump from a small net meter to a large net metered. These are such small systems that they're never going to trigger a change in the customer class. So I actually don't think it's a problem that some customers might choose to increase the size of their array. They would be allowed to do so if they were to install a hardwired rooftop system. So I don't see why they shouldn't be allowed to do so if they're doing a plug-in system. To the utilities' point, though, that they need to know about these systems, I think that's what the registration process is for. So with that, I will take any questions and happy to work with anybody who wants to improve this bill.
Oh, got a question?
Anybody else?
No.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Thank you, Sam. What do you think about the idea of limiting the number of devices to the maximum aggregate?
Yeah, it's a good question. So there's a couple of technical concerns when you have someone who's buying more than one of these things and plugging them in. The first is that they need enough individual circuits because you're supposed to plug one of these devices into a dedicated circuit. So you need 2 separate circuits that you're plugging 2 separate devices into, or else the circuit would trip. You know, it wouldn't have enough capacity on the breaker, and you'd be constantly tripping the breaker. So that's a self-limiting factor that would mitigate against needing to put that into statute. You know, if you had someone who's got a big enough home that they've got multiple outdoor circuits that they'd be able to plug in multiple of these devices, it seems like a pretty edge case. But that said, you know, I think as a baby step, I'm not ideologically opposed to limiting the number of devices in aggregate in statute to start, because I think that most customers that were imagining buying these things is probably just going to buy one system. So 2 contradictory statements there. Mostly, I would echo what a number of people have said, which is that I'm really interested in seeing this bill going forward, and am happy to work with the stakeholders to find a path forward.
No further questions. Thank you, Sam. David Trumbull.
Three more speakers. Sorry.
Sorry.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and committee members. My name is David Trumbull. I'm from the town of Ware. I do support the bill. Last night, there was a webinar held by Utah Stewardship, and the two guests were Representative Ray Ward, who's the Republican Utah representative who sponsored the bill, and a man named Kevin Chow from Bright Saver, an organization that's working on balcony solar. They had a lot of time for question and answer. I pointed out we were having a hearing today, and I asked them if Germany has 1 million households with these, which is what they told us at the meeting last night, what's their safety record and how does that work and how does that inform us? And they both said that the safety record in Germany was impeccable. There was no issues. There are 5 other countries that have this in Europe, and there's 3 more that have minor programs as well. Their systems are based on larger, they use the 1200. They're also looking at going to 1400. So the 800 would be extremely safe compared to what's going on there. They both made the point that the laws of physics are the same here and there, that there would be nothing that would prevent us from having an equally safe system here. There's some differences. They have 220 volts, we have 110, but they talked about dedicated outlets similar to like a ground fault interrupt outlet you might have in your kitchen, so that if you were concerned about the size or the amount, you could require a specific outlet. I realize that the amended copy of the bill says specifically 800 and it goes into any outlet. But as you work through this, you could say, well, we envision more, and it would have to have an outlet that would be specifically to receive this. They also talked about, what about medium-sized plants, which would be maybe slightly bigger than one of these 800. And they said that could be done with 1 to 3 hours of electrical work. So if you're worried about the apartment complex question came up, and what if 10 apartments, each of them have their own, you would, in that case, bring in an electrician and bring it back to the master panel, and with a couple hours of electrical work. And the key thing there is that just a couple hours of electrical work is not going to change the basic cost savings, because you're not putting like a solar panel on the roof of your house. And also the question of safety for linemen. They talked about inverters. I'm not a physicist, I don't really, but they indicated that in Germany, with over 1 million households using this, they don't have a safety problem. The second thing that came up is the cost being a driver for popularity. I've read that it's 6 years payback, but they said last night in Germany it's now down to 2 years, and that it can be as much as 30% of a small apartment's electric bill. There's been one study in the journal called Energies last year that said in the United States, the one study that's been done said in Michigan, based on 2015 data, that actually it would be 5 years, but they said with the dropping price of solar, it would be shorter than that. Now, Vermont's looking at a bill, and a gentleman named Ben Walsh from Vermont PIRG just wrote recently in Vermont Digger that it would be a 3-year payback in Vermont for these things. So you can see why people would be interested if they could save 20% of their electric bill each month, and it would pay for itself within 3 years. Other states are getting on board. They mentioned last night that there are now 9 states that have actual bills. We're the first out of the gate, but there are 9 states. There's 7 more that have a sponsor and a bill that's being drafted, and then there's 8 more that have sponsors who have not yet started drafting. So conceivably, this calendar year, there could be 24 states that put together some kind of bills. The other thing is that with all of the potential, you got a whole lot of new potential users. They talk, Ben Walsh talked about condo owners, you mentioned it, also mobile home owners could do it, and renters. With the cost savings, they're looking at the pilots for low-income communities. It's a chance for so many people to generate their own power. So whether it's you're into it for energy freedom or you're trying to lower your power bills, it's something that most people would, if they have any chance, would be willing to get involved in it. Mr. Chow's vision was that by the year 2035, there'd be 60 million homes or apartments in the United States using these. So it's great that New Hampshire's getting started, and I thank you for your good work on this and trying to resolve all the technical difficulties.
Thank you for your testimony. Any questions? Seeing none, well done.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Steve Rancourt. Steve, and I got Mark, and then I got Lindsay, all right. So you're, Wonderful. We've got a, all right.
Hi, good morning, committee, or afternoon. My name is Stephen Rancourt. I'm a licensed electrician in the state of New Hampshire and also the executive director of the Electrical Contractors Business Association, the ECBA.
Mark Weisflog, KW Management, member of the ECBA and a 28-year installer of solar.
First, we just want to start by saying that we don't have a position on this bill. We think it's a good idea, but while the concept of consumers being able to purchase online reduces the electrical consumption is terrific, there are some safety concerns. A lot have been brought up. The UL 3700, most of it is the, as indicated in those that you amended in the amendment of the bill, you addressed some of the issues we were looking at the original bill, that the quantity of the panels would be an issue, and the wattage of them being dropped helped a little bit, but the way that they attach and they plug in is one of the biggest concerns.
And going back to the reduction from 1,200 watts to 800 watts, it would be immensely helpful if you define that as either AC or DC. 800 watts AC would be probably.
I'm sorry.
Sorry. So the definition of the 800 watts, is that AC or DC? So typically in a solar array, the DC wattage is higher than the AC wattage. So an 800 watt AC inverter would support somewhere around 1,000 to 1,200 watts of DC solar. So the amount of modules would increase if you went with the AC, the 800 watts AC in the definition of what that device is. Secondly, I think what we talked about, or what you've already talked about, is pretty much addressing most all our concerns. We have a couple more issues. One is so when you look online and you're looking to buy one of these systems, which I went yesterday online because I don't usually look at these things, they come with lots of options. How many modules? 200, 400, 600, 800, 200 watt increments typically. They have to be assembled. They have to be wired together. They also have to be wired to the inverter. It doesn't come typically as a plug and play system unless it's really small, 200 watts or less. And then a wire has to be run from the inverter, from your balcony or wherever it might be, into the house. One website had this at a 50-foot cord. So you have to run a cord from your array to an exterior outlet or an interior outlet. If you don't have, it's an older house, doesn't have an exterior outlet, it's got to go through a window or door or something. At the same time, most newer homes have exterior outlets. They happen to be GFI protected, and UL 3700 has already identified a problem with that in backfeeding the GFI receptacle. The GFI receptacle circuitry would most likely fail, and the receptacle would still work, it's just not GFI protected. So if you plug something else into it, you're running a pool or something outside, you would probably lose your ground fault protection in that particular application. That said, UL 3700 has also identified separate circuits with separate outlets. Steve?
If I may, so the registration part was very important as well. We think that's because the number on there, but who would monitor or oversee that? And so that, because what stops somebody from just going and getting it and not registering? So does that cause a problem? Again, these are more questions. We're just throwing them out there. We know there's a lot to consider, but how does that overseeing the registration process? One of the things, just for electrically, if you plug that cord, just look at a typical plug, the prongs are sticking out. Those prongs are live for up to 2 seconds, possibly, as they suggested. And if a dog came running by in the house and hit that, and that cord hit a baby in the face, there is some hazard there. And I think that's what everybody behind us is trying to say is, let's fix that hazard, because it is a potential hazard. And also, if you put these units on and you have a 14 gauge wire in your house that's good for 15 amps, you don't have to know much about electrical, but you put more than 1,500 watts on that circuit, give or take, you're going to overload it. Again, how many they put and how many they put on a circuit is important. You put 2 or 3 of these on a circuit, even at 800 watts, it's 2,400 watts. It's not capable of handling that. You'll melt down the wire. At 120 volt, you have an imbalance as opposed to 240 volt. It balances your neutral. Not to get too technical, but there's a lot of concerns, and we hope that you'll let us work through those and try to work them out with everybody else that's spoken. We won't take up any more of your time.
Should we change all our plugs to the German plugs?
Yeah, the 240 volt.
That's a good point. So in Germany, it's a 240 volt system,
Right.
which means half the amperage. So an 800 watt system running in the United States is going to be 6.6 amps. In Germany, it's 3.33 amps. So you get less current on that same circuit if it's a 15 or 20 amp circuit. Not that that's a great hazard, but the math needs to get done.
Questions from the committee? Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Very much, really appreciate it. And our final speaker, I'm not gonna ask number 12 to come up. But it's Lindsay, and I can't read it, so it's Lindsay with a B. Burgoyne?
All right. Thank you. Lindsay Burgoyne, for the record, from Revision Energy. I don't fault you for not being able to pronounce complicated French Canadian last names.
It's just the writing.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thank you. First of all, Happy New Year. Good to see you all and be back here. Again, Lindsay with Revision Energy. I serve as the Director of Policy and Government Affairs. We are here today in support of the bill, and I think I would start off by just saying plug-in solar is not one of our offerings at Revision Energy, but we're pleased to support the legislation given its alignment with our mission to create a just and equitable electric future, and we desire to see that future regardless of whether we're doing the work. And obviously, as you've heard before me, we believe this bill will increase accessibility to renewable energy to a broad group of Granite Staters. I'll leave you with my written testimony. I'm not going to go through that, but I would say specifically, we appreciate that this legislation aims to simplify the interconnection process for small solar system applications by allowing individuals to install such technology through a notification process rather than a lengthy application process. Sadly, the interconnection process has become one of the greatest burdens in terms of deployment of clean energy alongside permitting and has significantly raised soft costs. And so we strongly agree that smaller projects should be relieved of such burdens. I think lastly, the only other piece that I'll offer, given that the conversation on UL listings is kind of the topic of the day, I would just say it's important to remember that the panels and inverters themselves are now compliant with UL 1741 as the initial bill outlines as components. And so while UL 3700 is looking at the entire system, the current panels and inverters that are on the market are not non-compliant with consumer protection and consumer safety ratings right now. So I just think that's important to point out. And we would also say that in our experience around the backfeeding conversation, a 400 watt panel, so two 800 watt panels, those are going to offset about 1,000 kilowatt hours a year. And so that's looking at kind of running your kitchen appliances. And so that's not going to do more than offset a home's baseload power. It's just going to contribute to that. And so in our experience, we're not concerned around backfeed with that because it's such a low amount of power produced. I'll leave it there. We could conclude by saying solar is a surprisingly simple solution to the affordability crisis. Thank you for your time.
Questions from the committee? Thank you very much, Lindsay. You are our final speaker, and I'm going to close the hearing on this at this point. Thank you very much. Yeah.
I've determined that the deadline for acting on FN bills is March 5th.
Thank you.
So he's got some time.
Provided, well, with the amendment, we don't really have an FM though, right?
But I think it might still be subject to that deadline.
That's fine, yeah.
I don't know.
We
I
still
mean,
have
in the
time.
House, it would be the Senate. Who knows?
Okay, well,
But
we'll get it done. Not much further, right, yeah. So March. Senator Waters, you're recognized. March Madness, right. You're recognized to introduce for Senator Pearl, SB 599 FM.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. I'm here to introduce Senator Waters, District 4, introduce Senate Bill 599 relative to the Renewable Energy Fund on behalf of Senator Pearl. What you will see in this bill is essentially the language that we put into House Bill 2 relating to the Energy Fund. And what our intent was in the budget, considering what came from the House, was to preserve some funding to the program for administrative costs and for potentially some new projects, because the House had eliminated it. and taken what was in the fund, pretty much all of it. But we thought it was important to be able to sustain some funding for it. So that's what we did in the budget. We thought that we were all set. But as it turned out, House Bill 682, which eliminated the fund, was signed after House Bill 2. So there we are. And so what Senator Pearl wanted to do, because that the House Bill 682, effective September 30th, 2025, amended the same statute and unintentionally restored the original language regarding renewable energy funds to support renewable energy initiatives, essentially eliminated the general fund transfer of the existing funds there, and we need that money and we're spending it. So it would have prevented the general fund lapse of $8 million that was in the budget, and we don't want to prevent that lapse. That would short the general fund $4 million a year moving forward. So we require legislative action to ensure that that lapse is taken, and also to ensure that that some funding continues for the renewable energy fund. So that is it.
Questions from the committee? Senator Rosenwald.
Thank you.
And you remember this, don't you,
I
Senator
do, and
Rosenwald?
I'm looking at a letter dated December 31st from James Gary to Ken Weiler as chair of the fiscal committee, in which he details how the governor is getting to the $16 million of general funds per year back of the budget cut. The House Bill 2, our intention was to keep $1 million in that fund. She swept all but $967,000 and a couple $100. So I guess my question is, why does, if you know, DOE need $1 million to administer a fund that has less than that amount of money to make grants with? I mean, what's left in the fund won't even cover their administrative expenses.
Yes, I can answer that. Our intent in House Bill 2 was to provide $1 million annually to support thermal, electrical, renewable energy initiatives, and not to support residential solar. So what we wanted to do in the budget was, yes, sweep the money, but that we thought that it was important for investors and for the Renewable Energy Fund to be able to approve some small amount of new projects in the areas there of thermal and electrical renewable energy initiatives. So that was our intent. So yes, most of it was going, but 1 million of it would be available each year to provide some new projects.
Well,
Yeah. So I do remember that, but I guess what I'm confused about is why are we allowing the Department of Energy to use the entire amount of money to cover administrative costs, leaving no money for grants, which is what this bill seems to do.
I think it says after funding, on line 16, 17. I'm sorry, I was looking at the, I'm sorry, I was looking at the wrong version. Of it. Let me go back to this. I was looking at the House Bill version, so excuse me. So it says on lines 14 and 15, after funding the administrative costs, up to 1 million annually. So that's the intent of this. after the administrative costs. The REF, the more money is produced than that $1 million plus administrative costs. So there will be money going to the general fund going forward. So this is meant to, yes, cover the administrative costs because they are still administering existing grants that they've made, and there's a tail to what they've done before, and then there are these new grants. But this wants to have $1 million available for the grants after the administrative costs. That's the intent of it, as it was in House Bill 2.
It doesn't have that much money.
Oh, yeah.
There's only 960. There's $967,000 in the fund. That's it.
We do have the department here who can actually go
Yeah.
through that.
Yeah.
I believe more money will be coming in because of the program.
Okay.
So
Thank you.
that's why.
Thank you, Senator.
Am I good?
Megan, you're our last speaker. No pressure. Yeah. No. well, Yeah. I'm just kidding.
Good afternoon. Again, I'm Meg Stone with the Department of Energy. Before I start, I'm sorry. Senator, to answer your question, so in July, the department receives the alternative compliance revenue into the Renewable Energy Fund, and I think each year recently it's been somewhere around $8 million. So what this language does is allows the administrative costs and then up to $1 million for programs. If that answers your question.
That makes sense?
So really, we're leaving $2 million in the fund, $1 million to administer, $1 million of grants. Would you agree with me that that seems kind of administratively top heavy?
So I don't know, I'm looking at Chris, he might know exactly how much the administrative costs are. I do not.
Hi, for the record, Chris Elms, Deputy Commissioner of the New Hampshire Department of Energy. Yes, Senator, so the REF funding does not just go to the staff who administer the RPS program. It also funds the staff at the Office of Energy Innovation, some of our regulatory staff who work on issues like that have a renewable or sustainable focus, issues with net metering, things that would come up there. And so there are a number of staff who are funded through the Renewable Energy Fund who aren't specifically working on REF programs. So yeah, I think you're about right. It's about $1 million, $1.5 million for those administrative costs. But that are costs associated with staff who don't just work on the RPS.
And if we lose that funding, what happens?
If there were no administrative costs, we would either have to, define different sources of funding or lose positions. But that was not under basically any of the proposals throughout the HB2 process, that was not a concern. That had been pretty consistently included within all of the language that was contemplated.
Thank you for your
Can I
testimony.
just
Yes,
ask
absolutely.
one more question? Thank you. On line 24, it applies to funds collected on or after July 1st of 2025.
Yep.
Have we collected funds between then and now?
Yes, some of that money has come in July. I don't have what that number is, but that would be, so in the HB2 budget, the surplus statement had approximately $20 million for that pre-July 1, $5 million for this next fiscal year, $5 million for the previous year will probably be right in line with that. I don't have the exact numbers, but I think it was about $8 million that's been received.
Okay, thank you.
Any further questions? Seeing none, we're going to close the hearing
Thank you.
on that. And then we're going to hear from the prime sponsor of SB 447. And I'm just going to hand that over to you.
Okay. If you would, sir, introduce yourself.
Yes, thank you, Mr. Chairman. My name is Kevin Avard, Senator from District 12. I represent, District 12, and I am the prime sponsor of SB 447. And basically, this is a repeat of what we just passed on consent yesterday. And basically, this is another bill which basically defines advanced nuclear resources, and it includes A&R options alongside renewable energy sources for utility services. Basically, this is a repeat, just in case our original bill fails. This is something that can be amended, just in case we need a Plan B option. So this is just a placeholder bill. Hopefully, we get past the finish line with what we've passed on consent. Hopefully, the House concedes and it goes to the governor's office, and we sign it into law. But if not, then we can get another bite at the apple. That's what this bill is.
Thank you, Senator. Any questions for the Senator? Maybe a small one, something? Nothing?
That's all right.
Thank you. Thank you for your testimony.
Thank you very much.
I love this committee. It's not the love.
We love you too.
And I don't think does anybody want, oh, you got speakers on this, really? All right, welcome. We have a lot of speakers on this. Okay. Chris Elms, welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman and members of the committee. For the record, Deputy Commissioner Chris Elms of the New Hampshire Department of Energy. In light of the chairman's testimony, I'll keep my remarks brief, if that's all right. As you know, we have testified on the three last year there were three bills that came together with this bill: Senate Bill 112, Senate Bill 228, and House Bill 710. I think this is the fourth iteration of the idea at combining those bills in some form or another. The department has expressed some technical concerns and policy questions on all three of those bills to varying degrees, and I'd be happy to go into them if you'd like. However, if this is just sort of a vehicle to use as insurance, we'd be happy to speak to the sponsor or the committee offline and provide some more of those technical questions, amendments, whatever it might be.
Thank you. Seeing no further questions.
Thank you.
Let's see. Molly. All set.
Good afternoon. For the record, I'm Molly Connors with New England Power Generators Association. I recognize the hour and maybe the mood of the room, and so I want to let the record reflect that I have submitted extensive testimony on Senate Bill 447. There's also an illustrative example that we have provided. We recognize that the Senate did pass a similar bill on consent yesterday. I should just underscore that what was passed yesterday was a significant change in the state's energy policy, and one that is not unanimously, has not yet passed the other chamber, if you would. And so we have certainly concerns about the bill that was passed yesterday, and we have significant concerns about the bill that's in front of you. I will not belabor those points. What I will say is Senate Bill 447 poses a tremendous threat to the existing generating facilities that are currently providing reliability at the lowest cost. Senate Bill 447 also would create a system of haves and have-nots in terms of electric power generating facilities. Generating facilities that would be selected by a small group of government officials versus the members of the organization that I represent who are competing every day, day in, day out, to provide electricity at the lowest cost and to provide reliability at the lowest cost. And so that is the bottom line for my testimony and my talking points. I'm happy to answer any questions, but I do recognize the hour and the mood of the room.
Thank you, Molly. Appreciate your testimony. Do any of those individuals generate electricity in New Hampshire?
I'm sorry, could you repeat the
Do any
question?
of your people that you represent generate electricity in New Hampshire?
That's a very good question. I should have said, I'm with the New England Power Generators Association. We represent all of the non-utility owned generators in New England, including the vast majority of the power plants in New Hampshire.
Thank you.
They employ roughly 800 people and spend approximately $250 million in taxes in the state every year.
Any questions? Thank you, Molly. Appreciate it.
Thank you.
Sarah Abramson. And it doesn't say if you support or oppose, so. Hi.
Hello. I'm Sarah Abramson. I'm Executive Director of the C10 Research and Education Foundation. We are agnostic to energy policy. Our primary program is providing radiological monitoring of the air in the 10-mile radius around the Seabrook Station nuclear power plant. And as such, we stay apolitical on energy policy that would favor one over the other so that we can maintain our credibility as a radiation monitoring organization. Our other programs do, however, include public outreach and education about radiological safety and emergency preparedness. And we also do advocacy and education to lawmakers. We work really closely with the U.S. Nuclear Regulatory Commission. And I have a direct line and speak quite frequently with the resident inspectors at Seabrook Station. And I'm sort of involved in both national and regional policy discussions about the safety of existing and possible future new nuclear. So I come to you today, I just wanted to make a couple comments on particular portions of the bill. The coordinator position, which was created in previous statute, seems to be facilitated through an existing position at the Office of Energy Innovation. And I read the report that came out on December 29th from that office.
Push the mic just a little bit away from you.
Oh, sure.
Yeah.
The opposite problem with
Yeah, no.
most people. I recently read the report that was issued from that office. The coordinator is required to issue a report annually. It came out on December 29th, and it highlights what the office has been doing in its statutory required activities, what that coordinator has been doing. And I perceive that the coordinator's role in the previous statute and as clarified here in this bill would be to engage with the public to provide education, and specifically to further the goal of the project being implemented. And so I just want to caution against having independence in who is providing information to the public about the costs, benefits, risks of a possible new nuclear facility in the state. Things that have worked in other states are citizen advisory panels. There are also other examples in Europe, in Sweden, in Switzerland, UK, and also north of us in Canada, where they've utilized what's called a consent-based or a collaboration-based siting system. I've actually just participated this year in a US Department of Energy funded consortium study on writing a policy document, sort of a program guide on how to engage with the public in a collaboration-based structured program. You may have seen in Bar None, Wyoming, there was a pretty extensive, and it would have been quite economically stimulating project to have a new nuclear facility there. They would also do nuclear reprocessing. They would also store some of the used fuel. That project failed primarily because of an enormous failure in engaging with the community. The same can be said of a nuclear waste storage site in New Mexico and Texas, where the industry leaders seeking to do these projects coordinated exclusively with a small group of people, as Molly mentioned, inside the state, and maybe a small group of business owners that stood to gain immensely in the short term, and they failed to engage with the community at large. And it is a death knell in a project when you say nuclear. I also was very aware and interested in the Nuclear Commission, the study that was done, and their report that was published in 2023. My organization specifically was mentioned. It said opposing organization, which is a misnomer and a little maybe intentionally misleading, but it recognized broadly that when Seabrook was first built, there was immense interest in the public. And when people and when people don't get access, free access and transparency to information, they often fill in the blank with the worst thing they can think of. And so I really want to caution against having this coordinator role maybe not be independent, because they have to be furthering the energy goals of the administration. They have to sort of be furthering the goal of citing this new nuclear project. A panel, it's not without precedent. It's being used. There's similar bills being written in Massachusetts that create such a panel. If there are any new nuclear site, you have this citizens advisory panel that's created. The seats are defined as having membership from the nuclear industry, having membership from the coordinator in the Office of Energy Innovation, you could define it that way, and then 6 at-large seats that would be citizens that could be picked by the governor's administration.
So are you suggesting we amend the bill?
As an advocate, I'm trying to educate you on what's out there. I think that the bill could benefit from having a panel, especially if part of the unsavoriness that might be being perceived by others in the community about new nuclear is a flashback to not feeling like they have information. Bar None, Wyoming is a very similar culture to New Hampshire. I don't know. I haven't spent a lot of time in Wyoming, but I did speak quite a bit to constituents out there who found C10 online and kind of asked for advice. When you omit folks from the process, both on paper and in reality, you're kind of walking down the wrong path from the beginning. And so I would encourage you considering either within this bill or separately creating a citizens advisory panel.
Thank you. Questions from the committee? Yeah, Senator Waters.
Thanks so much for your input. I don't know if you're familiar with our Office of the Consumer Advocate, and I just wondered if you might take a look at how that functions and then see if, given how that functions, what your advice would be.
Sure, I will take a look at that.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah.
Further questions? Thank you very much.
Thank you.
Mr. Billow.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chairman, members of the committee. I'm Clifton Below, Chair of the Regulatory and Legislative Affairs Committee of the Community Power Coalition of New Hampshire. And the coalition doesn't take a position for or against the bill, but we just wanted to offer a few quick, brief observations, comments, questions on the bill. Appreciate the intent and purpose of the bill. Particularly sections 4 and 5, where you seek to expand opportunities for low, moderate income community solar and expand participation in municipal host group net metering. A bit of a concern in section 7, expanding the size for LMI solar projects to 3 megawatts. In the absence of temporal price signals and the ability to couple such larger systems with storage. The concern there is New England generally has more than enough solar around solar noon on sunny days. It's when the price dips very low. It's when power is least valuable, but under our current net metering with no temporal price signals, the incentive is to build systems that produce most of their power around solar noon, fixed orientation systems. Fortunately, there is a little bit of movement towards trying to get some temporal price signals, but they're not there yet. Unitil has a project, single axis tracker, that produces more earlier in the day and the late in the day when the power is more valuable. And there are a couple of bills in the House that hopefully will get to the Senate that enable storage as part of it. So even a conventional fixed orientation system could store some of that sort of low value power around solar noon and send it to the grid when it's more valuable late in the day. So that's just an observation. Finally, on the purchase power agreement concern, it does, provide that the commission could approve such PPAs if it finds the agreements to be just and reasonable and in the public interest. which presumably means they're also finding that they would be prudently incurred. The problem arises like a few years down the road. It looked like a good deal at the time, but if it turns out to be above market and the utilities, presumably this would just be used for their default service and not for competitive supplier service, absent some other legislation. But then the problem becomes, what if they lose the customer base, or the price is such that that helps reduce the customer base, and they end up potentially with new stranded cost? Who is that going to be recovered from? So that's just a general concern. And I would just note that in the large C&I class, those that have interval metering, most of those customers, on the order of 80 to 90% or more of that load has been on competitive supply for a decade or 2 decades, because with interval data, competitive suppliers can offer them better value. And now with the advent of municipal aggregation, there are more choices, and the 2 smaller utilities, Liberty and Unitil, have now most of their smaller customers are also on competitive supply, so that neither of them would be in a position to use, I don't believe, 1 million megawatt hours of power, such as might be contemplated here. So those are the concerns.
Thank you, Clifton. Questions from the committee? Well done.
Thank you.
Appreciate it. Chad.
Thank you, Chairman Abard and members of the committee. My name is Chad Whitaker. I'm the founder of Pure Source Consulting. We specialize in helping public housing authorities procure HUD-compliant community solar contracts. We represent the Boston Housing Authority, Buffalo and Albany, New York, Jersey City, now down in New Jersey, almost every housing authority in the state of Maine, and we are currently working with a couple of housing authorities in New Hampshire, most notably Manchester Housing and Redevelopment Authority. We are in support of the bill. The only major concern we really have is regarding the definition of municipal host. And I've testified before this committee before and brought this up. But the issue that we have is regarding the low-income housing tax credit properties that were traditionally owned by public housing authorities, but their subsidies have changed. And because their subsidies have changed, they are now administered by the housing authority, but they are owned under a separate legal entity. So for example, the Manchester Housing Authority may have owned a property at one point, which they decided to redevelop. When they redeveloped it, they took out private debt. They have a tax equity partner, and for all intents and purposes, the housing authority is still operating this property the way it was operated before. But because it's under a new legal entity, it would no longer qualify as a quasi-municipal or a public, was technical definition is a public subdivision. The Department of Energy had determined that the low-income housing tax credit properties do not meet the definition of a municipal host. In practicality, what that means is that when the housing authorities in New Hampshire go out into an RFP in order to obtain HUD-compliant contracts, they would not be able to enroll their entire portfolio to a municipal project. They own the entire portfolio, they manage the entire portfolio, they operate the entire portfolio, but because there is a different legal entity, such as an LLC, that they are the controlling member of, that legal distinction of the ownership of that property eliminates that property from being able to benefit from a municipal host site. So we would like to see a minor change in the phrasing of the definition of municipal host to allow these specific properties that were owned by the housing authority and are now managed by the housing authority, but owned under a different LLC or an LLP that has a tax equity partner, to still be able to benefit from the municipal host sites the way the rest of the portfolio would be able to. There's a very practical, situation where we could do an RFP, we could receive responses from developers, and then we have to bifurcate which properties can actually benefit from that solar array and which properties cannot. And if we can't find another solar array that meets the definition of the low income type of solar array, these properties are just not going to be able to get benefited at all.
Thank you for your testimony. Questions from the committee? Seeing none. You did a good job.
Thank you.
And our last speaker, Lindsay.
All right, closing out the day once again. For the record, Lindsay Burgoyne, Director of Policy and Government Affairs for Revision Energy, Chairman Abard, member of the committee. Given our experience in solar system installations around the state, we're present here today to speak in support of Section 3, 4, and 5 within 447, understanding the goal for the bill that Senator Abard just presented. We'll just take a moment to briefly remind the committee why we are supportive and flag there are some differences with the legislation that passed yesterday. So first off, we're pleased to see this committee's continued interest in addressing the small customer generator size threshold, which is in Section 3. As we've outlined before, New Hampshire's net metering law works well enough for homeowners and organizations to install small solar systems on roofs, but the moment you kind of cross that arbitrary line from small to large, you lose significant value and face a double penalty. And that's in terms of changes in netting and also receiving less value for the power produced. The bill before you, 447, does address monthly netting. Obviously, we're very supportive of that, but it does not address the second challenge, which is the size threshold. Just briefly on that, we think it's unfair essentially to treat projects that are 150 kilowatts in size the same as a 3 megawatt municipal project. They're cited and financed very differently and have very different economies of scales. And these small projects are what you see on municipal buildings, small businesses, YMCAs. So we do ask the committee to address that second hurdle for those smaller projects. And we've attached a memo to our testimony that outlines the reasoning for this change, kind of why we believe that's prudent and reasonable, and have included recommended legislative language for your consideration as these bills come together and you finalize a package. We would also remind the committee that, as you know, this language was in SB 228 last year, and there was a significant amount of business testimony from Elm Grove Property Management, National Granite Flooring, Promocentric, Stonyfield Organics, Tri-K Industries, and the nonprofit YMCA of Greater Nashua in support of that. We also support Section 4, the Electric Assistance Program expansion. We would note what's written in this bill is an expansion of the program from 6 megawatts to 18 megawatts annually. And if I'm not mistaken, what passed yesterday moves it to 12 megawatts. So there are some differences there. And I'm actually not fully sure if the size change of projects from 1 to 3 megawatts was in the bill yesterday. So we need to check in on that. Obviously, that's something we support in terms of expanding access to low to moderate income folks. We would also note that there are challenges in the EAP's design itself that result in limited construction and building the total megawatts allowed. And if there is ever interest in talking about that and figuring out essentially changes we could make to make that more effective, we would be happy to offer up additional language. And then lastly, support Section 5, as you just heard, the change in definition around municipal host, and would also remind the committee that expressly allows public housing authorities, many of whom also testified on SB 228. So thank you for your time, and urge you to support Sections 3, 4, 5, and 7.
Thank you for your testimony. Other questions? Seeing none, well done. And with that, we are going to close the hearing on SB 447. Yeah. Yeah, yeah. Oh, you have 10 seconds. I'll give you 12. That's the kind of guy I am. Welcome.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. For your record, Bruce Berkey with Symphony Capital Group, and we represent NextEra Energy, the majority owner of Seabrook Station. And I just wanted to reiterate past testimony from last year, and that we are in strong support of Senate Bill 447. We applaud the excellent work of the Senate yesterday afternoon in passing, I believe it was House Bill 221. And but because there was some earlier testimony that suggested that perhaps Seabrook Station did not support the bill, I wanted to make certain that this committee was aware that we do support Senate Bill 447.
It's
Thank
very
you.
helpful. Thank
Okay,
you.
Thanks.
And no further questions? Thank you very much, Bruce. And with that, all right, anybody else want 10 seconds? I'll give you 12. All right, with that, we're going to close the hearing. And is there a motion to move out of whatever? We're dismissed. We don't have anything else unless you wanted to exec anything. And so we will close the hearings. Thank you, everybody.